My name is Christina, I'm 34 years old, and my own sister had an affair with my husband and faked a pregnancy to try and steal my house and my life. Before I tell you how I orchestrated a legal takedown that left them with absolutely nothing but their shame, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all detonated on a Tuesday evening, a day that had been perfectly ordinary until the moment I walked through my own front door. I remember the digital clock on the oven blinked 6:15 p.m. My arms were laden with groceries for a chicken piccata I was planning to make, a recipe Michael loved. But the scene that greeted me froze the blood in my veins. There they were, sitting side by side on my gray linen couch, my husband, Michael, and my younger sister, Hannah. They weren't watching television or talking. They were waiting, a silent, two-person tribunal ready to pass judgment on me. The air in the room was so thick with tension I could taste it, metallic and cold. Michael, the man whose dreams I had financed for 7 long years, the man I had loved since I was 24, couldn't bring himself to look at me. His gaze was fixed on a meaningless spot on the wall just over my shoulder, his jaw tight. It was Hannah, of course, who broke the silence. Her voice, usually light and bubbly, was now laced with a strange, rehearsed solemnity that made my skin crawl. "Christina, we need to talk." Michael finally cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "I want a divorce," he said. The words were flat, devoid of emotion, as if he were reading a line from one of his mediocre scripts. I felt the paper grocery bag start to give way in my arms. I heard the distinct, sickening crack of an egg breaking inside. But I remained rooted to the spot, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I said nothing. I just watched them, my mind struggling to catch up to the reality unfolding in front of me. That's when Hannah made her move. She rose from the couch with a fluid, theatrical grace, and with emotion that was both deliberate and nauseating, she placed a protective hand over her flat stomach. Her eyes, which were my mother's eyes, gleamed with a vicious, triumphant malice I realized I had been willfully ignoring for weeks. "You should probably pack a bag and leave tonight," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm pregnant with Michael's child. And we need this house. The baby needs stability." The silence that followed was a living thing. It pressed in on me, suffocating me. They were waiting for the explosion. They wanted tears, screams, a satisfyingly hysterical breakdown. I could see it in their smug, expectant faces. They had laid their trap, sprung it, and were now waiting to admire their catch. They believed they had won. They believed they had stripped me of everything. I took a slow, deliberate breath, the air burning my lungs. I carefully lowered the grocery bags to the floor, my movements precise and controlled. A small puddle of raw egg and milk was already seeping onto the hardwood floor I had painstakingly refinished myself 2 summers ago. I looked at Michael, at his handsome, cowardly face. Then I looked at my sister, my own flesh and blood, who was practically vibrating with her victory. And then, from a place of cold, clear calm deep inside me, I uttered the 5 words that would detonate their entire world. "This is my house." I let the statement hang in the air, watching as confusion clouded their triumphant expressions. It was a variable they hadn't accounted for in their cruel equation. "And," I added, my voice as sharp and clean as shattering glass, "you both have exactly 24 hours to get out." To truly grasp the depth of that betrayal, you have to understand the foundation of lies upon which my life had been built. My marriage and my family were intertwined in a toxic dance I had been too blind, or perhaps too willing, to see. I met Michael in my early 20s. He was an actor, or rather, an aspiring actor. He had the looks, the charm, and a bottomless well of ambition. He spoke of his craft, of his destiny for greatness, and I, a practical-minded girl working her way up in a finance firm, was utterly captivated. I believed in him. We dated for 3 years, and for 7 years after that, I was the quintessential supportive wife. My life became secondary to his dream. My salary, which was substantial and steady, became our primary source of income. It paid for our life, but more importantly, it paid for his career. Thousands of dollars on new headshots, workshops with expensive acting coaches, cross-country trips for auditions that never panned out. I remember once, I had a chance to get my promotion, a vice president title at my firm. It was a huge step, the culmination of years of hard work. But it required a 6-week training program in London. Michael had a callback for a small role in a pilot that same month. He told me he couldn't possibly prepare for it without me there to run lines with him, to be his emotional support. He needed me. So, I told my boss I wasn't ready for the promotion. I stayed home. He didn't get the part. Our life was comfortable, but it was a comfort I single-handedly provided. The house was the most significant proof of that. It was a charming 3-bedroom colonial I'd fallen in love with. I bought it a year before we got married, using a modest inheritance my grandmother had left me, combined with years of my own aggressive savings. The down payment, the mortgage, the property taxes, the endless repairs, every single penny came from my bank account. Michael's name was never on the deed, never on the loan. It was a practical decision at the time. His credit was terrible, and his income was sporadic at best. It was a decision that would ultimately save me. And then there was my family. On the surface, we were a typical suburban family. But beneath that veneer, there was a deeply ingrained hierarchy. I was the responsible one, the old reliable Christina. I got good grades, built a stable career, and never caused any trouble. Hannah was the star. She was the beautiful, spontaneous, free-spirited one. My parents adored her. Her flaws were quirks, her mistakes were learning experiences. My successes, on the other hand, were simply expected. I remember one year for my birthday, they gave me a high-end vacuum cleaner because, as my mother put it, "You're so practical, dear." For Hannah's birthday a month later, they paid for a weekend trip for her and a friend to a spa in Napa. The message was clear: I was the workhorse, she was the princess. This dynamic, this golden child syndrome, was the fertile ground in which the seeds of betrayal were sown. So, when Hannah called me 2 months ago, her voice choked with manufactured tears, spinning a sob story about her fiancé leaving her and her job letting her go on the same day, my conditioning kicked in. She was my sister. She was in trouble. I had to fix it. Against my better judgment, I invited her to stay with us. Just for a little while, I told Michael. Just until she gets back on her feet. My best friend, Jocelyn, was my only voice of reason. We'd been friends since kindergarten, and she saw through Hannah's act with a clarity I lacked. "Chris, are you out of your mind?" she'd said over the phone. "This is the same girl who accidentally told your high school boyfriend you had a crush on his best friend just to see what would happen. She thrives on chaos." I defended Hannah, of course. "That was a lifetime ago, Joss. People change. She's my family." Jocelyn sighed. I could almost hear her shaking her head. "Okay," she said, her voice softening. "But do me a favor. Just be careful. Lock up your financial statements, your personal papers. You know how she is. She's a snoop." I promised I would, but in the whirlwind of preparing a room for my sister, I forgot. It was a mistake that would nearly cost me everything. The first few days of Hannah's stay were a masterclass in manipulation. She was a ghost in the house, full of whispered thank yous and offers to help that she never followed through on. She was grieving, I told myself. She needed space. By the second week, however, the grieving victim persona evaporated, replaced by the entitled queen of the castle. My home, my sanctuary, became her personal hotel and spa. She would emerge from her room around noon, dressed in my silk robe, and complain that the coffee I'd made at 7 a.m. was cold. She began a campaign of subtle psychological warfare, chipping away at my confidence one passive-aggressive comment at a time. "You know, Mom's meatloaf never came out this dry," she'd say, poking at the dinner I'd rushed home to make. She reorganized my pantry, putting everything in illogical places, then watched with a smirk as I frantically searched for the paprika. One day, I came home to find she'd done our laundry and accidentally shrunk my favorite, most expensive work blouse. "Oops," she'd said with a flippant shrug. "It must be cheap fabric." Then, her focus shifted to Michael. It was a calculated, predatory campaign. She began by stroking his perpetually wounded ego. "You have so much raw talent, Michael," she'd sigh, watching him practice a monologue. "Christina is so lucky to have a man with such a passionate soul." She made him feel seen, understood, appreciated in a way she implied I never could. The compliments soon escalated. She started creating opportunities to be alone with him. When I was at work, they would go for long walks or to cafes to run lines. I came home one Friday afternoon to find them on the back patio, sharing a bottle of expensive wine I had been saving for a special occasion, laughing intimately, their heads close together. The air was charged with a kind of energy that excluded me entirely. Michael began to change. The man I knew, who had been at least kind and affectionate, was replaced by a sullen, critical stranger. He started finding fault in everything I did. He adopted Hannah's criticisms as his own. "This house is always a mess," he'd complain, ignoring the fact that I was the only one who ever cleaned it. He became secretive with his phone, angling it away from me whenever a text came in. The gaslighting was relentless. When I finally gathered the courage to ask why he was spending so much time with Hannah, he flew into a rage. "What, are you jealous?" he sneered. "Can't I even be friends with your sister? You're so insecure, Christina. It's suffocating." He made me feel like I was the crazy one, that my valid suspicions were proof of my own failings. But the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. I started noticing discrepancies in our joint checking account, the one I exclusively funded. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. A $200 charge at a fancy steakhouse I'd never been to. A $300 charge from a high-end boutique. I found the receipt for the boutique crumpled in his jeans pocket, a lacy, red dress, size small. Hannah's size. The final, undeniable proof came from two separate sources. First, I came home unexpectedly one afternoon to grab a file I'd forgotten and overheard Hannah on the phone in her room. Her voice was low and smug. "Don't worry, Mom, it's all going according to plan," she was saying. "He completely believes the story about the family trust fund. He thinks Christina is just hoarding the money. He's ready to leave her. It's just a matter of time." A family trust fund. The lie was so audacious, so completely fabricated, that it took my breath away. And my mother was part of it. The betrayal was a physical shock, a jolt that went through my entire body. The very next day, Jocelyn called. Her voice was tight with anger. "Chris, I have to tell you something, and you're not going to like it," she said. "I was at the new hotel bar downtown for a work event last night. I saw them. Michael and Hannah. They were in a booth, and he was feeding her dessert. And then they kissed. It wasn't a friendly kiss, Chris. It was a real kiss. That was it." The last shred of denial I was clinging to was ripped away. I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't insecure. I was being played for a fool by the two people I should have been able to trust the most in the world. That night, I didn't confront them. I was too hurt, too raw. Instead, I retreated to my office. I opened the password-protected spreadsheet I had created. With trembling hands, I entered the new data points, the lies, the stolen money, the kiss. I was no longer just a wife. I was an investigator, building a case against the saboteurs in my own home. I decided to wait, to gather my strength, and to choose my moment. The next day, I went grocery shopping after work, my mind a whirlwind of strategy. I walked through my front door, my arms full of food I would never cook, and walked straight into their pathetic, pre-planned ambush. They thought they were in control. They had no idea I was the one about to lower the boom. The silence that descended upon the living room after I declared my ownership of the house was profound. It was the sound of two deeply narcissistic people having their reality violently rearranged. Hannah's face, which had been a mask of smug pity, crumpled into a mask of ugly confusion. Michael, for his part, just stared, his mouth hanging slightly agape like a fish. He looked from me to Hannah and back again, the gears in his head grinding, trying to process this new, unwelcome information. What are you talking about? He finally managed to stammer, his voice a full octave higher than usual. This is our house. We chose the paint colors together. We built a life here. The sheer audacity of that we almost made me laugh. No, Michael, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Let me be perfectly clear so there are no misunderstandings. You lived here. I built the life. I bought this house with my inheritance and my savings a full year before you and I were married. My name, and only my name, is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage I paid off with my salary. Legally, in the state of California, it is my sole and separate property. It is not a marital asset. You have absolutely no claim to it. I saw the flicker of genuine panic in his eyes then. This wasn't part of their script. They had built their entire plan on the foundation of my perceived weakness and their assumed ownership of my assets. They had miscalculated on a colossal scale. He and Hannah began a frantic, whispered argument, their heads close together. I could hear snippets. You told me, I just assumed, what do we do now? I let them stew for a full minute before I walked to the front door and pulled it open, letting the cool evening air rush in. The clock is ticking, I said, my voice echoing in the suddenly cavernous feeling room. Your 24 hours started 5 minutes ago. They scrambled out of the house, not to pack their things, but to stand on the lawn, huddled over a cell phone. I didn't need to guess who they were calling. The call came to my phone less than 20 minutes later. The caller ID read, MOM. I let it ring 4 times before I answered, steeling myself. I still held a tiny, foolish flicker of hope that she would, for once in her life, side with me. Christina, she began, her voice sharp and accusatory, dispensing with any greeting. Hannah just called me, hysterical. What is this I hear? You're throwing your own sister, your pregnant sister, out on the street? The last flicker of hope died. Tears of rage and grief pricked at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Mom, I said, my voice tight. Hannah has been having an affair with my husband. My husband, Mom. They betrayed me. They conspired to take my home. Her response was a knife to the heart. Oh, Christina, don't be so dramatic, she sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Hannah is emotional. She makes mistakes. She's young. If she's pregnant with Michael's child, then a divorce is the most sensible option. He needs to be with the mother of his child. You are the older sister. You have a good job, you're strong. You need to be the bigger person here and make the necessary sacrifice for your family. Sacrifice. That word again. It was the story of my life. I had sacrificed my career ambitions, my financial security, my peace of mind. And now my own mother was demanding I sacrifice my home and my dignity on the altar of her golden child's latest mistake. Something inside me, a cord of obligation and filial duty that had been stretched taut for 34 years, finally snapped. The part of me that had spent a lifetime desperately trying to earn their approval simply withered and blew away. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a cannon blast. What did you just say to me? She asked, her voice rising in disbelief. I said no, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. I will not sacrifice anything else. This conversation is over. I pressed the end call button before she could respond. That night was a descent into hell. I locked the doors, but I couldn't lock out the memories. The house was a mausoleum of my failed marriage. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, looking at the photos of a smiling couple who were strangers to me now. I finally collapsed onto the cold tiles of the kitchen floor, the spot where the groceries had fallen, and I let it all out. I sobbed until my throat was raw and my body ached, a gut-wrenching, soul-cleansing grief for the life I thought I had, the family I wished for, and the love I had so foolishly given away. It was the absolute lowest point of my life. But as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the kitchen window, something shifted. The grief hadn't vanished, but it had been burned away by the fury, leaving behind something hard and clear and unbreakable: resolve. I pushed myself up off the floor. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. My face was a wreck, my eyes swollen slits, but for the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a fighter. I marched to the coffee maker, brewed the strongest pot of coffee I could, and sat down at my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet, my fortress of facts. And then I made the most important phone call of my life. When the receptionist at the city's top family law firm answered, my voice was clear and steady. "My name is Christina," I said. "I need to schedule an emergency consultation with your best divorce attorney. The one who handles high-conflict cases." The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. It was a masterpiece of legal theater, and I was the silent director. My parents, predictably, insisted on attending. They came with Hannah and Michael, a united front of delusion, ready to bully me into submission. They strode into the plush, wood-paneled conference room of Mr. Davis's law firm as if they owned the place, their faces set with grim determination. They were there to see me break. They had no idea they were walking into their own public dismantling. My lawyer, Mr. Davis, was everything I had hoped for. He was in his late 60s, with a calm demeanor that masked a mind like a steel trap. He greeted everyone politely, gestured for them to sit at the enormous mahogany conference table, and then sat back, steepling his fingers, letting the silence build. He nodded to Michael's lawyer, a slick, overconfident man in a suit that was too shiny, to begin. The man launched into a prepared speech, his voice booming with false confidence. He laid out their demands: 50% of the equity of the house, citing Michael's non-financial contributions to the marriage. He requested substantial ongoing spousal support, or alimony, to compensate for the detriment to his acting career caused by the marriage. Finally, he demanded a gag order to prevent me from discussing the affair, to protect the privacy of the unborn child. When he finished, a smug smile played on his lips. Michael looked confident. Hannah looked vindicated. My parents looked proud. Mr. Davis didn't respond immediately. He let the man's arrogant demands hang in the air for a long moment. Then, he slowly reached into his pristine leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound document. He slid it across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Michael's lawyer. "This," Mr. Davis said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "is the premarital purchase agreement for the property located at 123 Oak Street, along with the title deed and a complete history of the mortgage payments, all of which were drawn from accounts belonging solely to my client. As you will clearly see, the property is a non-marital asset, purchased entirely with my client's personal funds and inheritance prior to the marriage. Under California law, your client has precisely zero legal claim to it." The shiny lawyer's face lost its color as he flipped through the pages. Michael leaned over, his eyes scanning the documents, his confident facade beginning to crack. My father, never one to be deterred by facts, began to bluster. "Now, see here," he boomed. "This is a family matter. There is a child to consider. Our grandchild." My mother, seizing her cue, chimed in, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Christina, how can you be so cruel, so heartless? This is your sister's baby. Your own flesh and blood." This was the moment. The pivot upon which everything would turn. Mr. Davis held up a single, calming hand. "On the matter of the alleged pregnancy," he said, his voice still perfectly even, "we did, of course, perform our due diligence." He reached back into his briefcase and pulled out a second, thicker file. He opened it and began to lay out its contents on the table like a dealer revealing a winning hand. First, a series of glossy 8 by 10 photographs. The first showed Hannah, just 4 nights ago, at a trendy downtown wine bar, laughing with a friend, a half-empty glass of Cabernet clearly visible in her hand. The next few photos, time-stamped, showed her entering and leaving the same bar over the course of 3 hours. "This is from a licensed private investigator," Mr. Davis explained conversationally. He then produced a signed and notarized affidavit. "And this is from the office manager of the top 3 obstetrics clinics in the city, attesting that no one by the name of Hannah Evans has been a patient at their facilities in the past year." He paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. "We also have a sworn statement from my client's friend, Ms. Jocelyn Peters, who is prepared to testify under oath about Ms. Evans's regular and recent alcohol consumption. Would you like me to continue, or has the point been sufficiently made?" A choked, strangled sob escaped Hannah's lips. Every eye in the room swiveled to her. She was ashen, her body trembling. She couldn't speak. She just shook her head, hot tears of pure, undiluted humiliation finally streaming down her cheeks. The lie, her ultimate weapon, had been exposed and neutralized with cold, hard facts. And then, the beautiful, glorious implosion I had been waiting for began. Michael, his face a grotesque mask of fury and betrayal, whipped his head around to face her. "You lied to me," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You're not pregnant? The whole thing was a lie? I thought it would be the only way to make you leave her." Hannah wailed, her defense pathetic and weak. "Leave her?" Michael screamed, completely losing control. He shot to his feet, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at her. "I was only doing this for the money. For the family trust fund you said she was hiding from me. You told me your family had money. You lied about everything." Silence. A stunning, damning silence. He had just confessed, in a room with 2 lawyers and a court reporter Mr. Davis had thoughtfully hired, to conspiracy to commit fraud. My parents stared at him, their faces slack with horror. Not at his greed, I realized, but at the sheer, vulgar stupidity of his public confession. But Mr. Davis, the maestro of this symphony of destruction, was not yet finished. He reached into his briefcase one last time. "And finally," he said, his voice dropping to a grave, serious tone, "while we are clearing things up, we have the matter of felony identity theft." He laid out the final set of documents, copies of credit card statements from 3 major banks. The cards were all in my name, opened using my social security number, which Hannah had stolen from my files. The total balance owing was just over $20,000. "This," Mr. Davis concluded, looking directly at Hannah, then slowly panning his gaze to my parents, "has now officially escalated from a contentious divorce proceeding to a potential criminal matter with significant jail time. The district attorney's office tends to take these things very seriously." Checkmate. The king was toppled. The queen was captured. The entire board was cleared. The immediate aftermath in that conference room was a chaotic tableau of quiet panic. Michael collapsed back into his chair as if his strings had been cut, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear, no doubt explaining the legal abyss he had just leaped into. My mother was weeping openly now, not for me, but for the public destruction of her perfect family narrative. My father, for the first time in his life, was utterly speechless, his face a mottled shade of red and white. And Hannah, she just sat there, a hollowed-out shell, staring at the pile of evidence that had just incinerated her life. I stood up. My legs felt strong and steady. Mr. Davis rose with me, a silent, supportive presence at my side. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was a tangible thing, a weight that had been lifted from my shoulders and settled squarely on theirs. I allowed myself one last look at the architects of my pain. I looked at my parents. "You made your choice," I said, my voice clear and final, cutting through their quiet misery. "You've been making it my whole life. I hope she was worth it." My mother looked up, her face a mess of tears and mascara, her mouth opening to plead. "Christina, please, we're family." I didn't let her finish. I turned my back on them and walked toward the door. My father, jolted into action, started to follow me into the hallway. "Wait, Christina. Let's just talk this through." Mr. Davis, ever the professional, stepped smoothly between us, physically blocking my father's path. "Mr. and Mrs. Evans," he said, his tone polite but as unyielding as granite. "As I'm sure your daughter's future ex-husband's counsel will advise him, all future communication with my client will be conducted exclusively through this office. Any attempt to contact her directly could be construed as harassment. Do I make myself clear?" My father stopped dead, his mouth snapping shut. He understood. The wall was up. The door was locked. The key had been thrown away. I didn't look back. I walked out of that opulent, air-conditioned building and into the bright, noisy reality of a Tuesday afternoon. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and the city air, usually thick with exhaust fumes, smelled like freedom. It was the first truly free breath I had taken in 7 years. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I opened my contacts list. Mom. Dad. Hannah. Michael. One by one, I tapped the screen. Block. Delete. Erase. It was a small, digital act, but it felt monumental. It was the severing of a poisoned limb. It was finally, truly, over. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Faced with irrefutable evidence of conspiracy and fraud, Michael signed every document Mr. Davis put in front of him. He walked away from our 7-year marriage with a single suitcase of his clothes and the mountain of personal debt he had accumulated. Hannah, facing a felony complaint for identity theft, tearfully agreed to a legally binding settlement. She would pay back every single cent she had stolen, with interest, via wage garnishment. It would cripple her financially for at least a decade. I sold the house. As much as it was my victory, it was also the scene of the crime. The memories were etched into the walls. I needed a completely clean break, a new canvas. I took the substantial proceeds from the sale and started over. A year can feel like a lifetime. Today, as I sit in my new apartment, a bright, airy space downtown with a view of the city skyline, the woman who collapsed on her kitchen floor feels like a different person, someone I know but no longer am. My career, the one I had put on the back burner for so long, exploded. Freed from the emotional and financial drain of supporting Michael, I poured all that energy into myself. I not only got the promotion to vice president, but 6 months after that, I was headhunted by a rival firm for an even better position with a salary that was almost double what I had been making. I discovered that I wasn't just competent at my job, I was a powerhouse. I had just never allowed myself to fully embrace it. I still hear whispers about them, of course. Small towns and interconnected industries have long memories. Jocelyn, my rock through all of this, told me she saw Michael waiting tables at a mid-range chain restaurant. He had gained weight, she said, and had the dull, defeated look of a man whose dreams had curdled. Another acquaintance mentioned seeing Hannah working a checkout counter at a discount grocery store, looking tired and haggard, her golden girl shine completely gone. My parents, I heard from a cousin, had become reclusive. The public shame of their children's implosion was too much for their fragile egos. They got the life they had built, one founded on lies and favoritism. But the most profound change in my life wasn't the career success or the financial independence. It was the quiet, unshakable peace. It was the simple joy of waking up in a home that was a sanctuary, not a battleground. It was the power of setting healthy boundaries and enforcing them without guilt. And it was about transforming my pain into a purpose. Using a portion of the settlement money and my own newfound wealth, I established a small foundation. I call it the Phoenix Fund. It provides scholarships for women who have survived financial and emotional abuse, helping them get professional certifications in fields like finance, law, and tech. It's a small college fund, a little boost to give them the tools to forge their own independence, just as I had to. Each time I review an application, each time I read a story of a woman fighting to reclaim her life, I'm healing a part of myself. There are moments, usually late at night, when I stand at my floor-to-ceiling window and look out at the sprawling tapestry of city lights below. I think about how the most devastating betrayal of my life was, in a strange and painful way, the greatest gift I ever received. It didn't just break my heart, it broke the chains that had bound me for my entire life. It forced me to see my own worth, a worth that was never reflected in the eyes of the people who were supposed to love me most. I learned that sometimes, the only way to build a new, stronger structure is to burn the old, rotten one to the ground. My life isn't a perfect fairy tale. It's better. It's real. And every single piece of it is mine, earned and owned. This coming weekend, I'm driving a few hours north. The very first recipient of the Phoenix Fund Scholarship is graduating with her paralegal degree. She's a single mom who escaped a terrible situation, and her courage is breathtaking. I wouldn't miss her ceremony for the world. As I grab my keys from the bowl by the door, ready to leave, I catch my own reflection in the hallway mirror. I see a woman I recognize. A woman who is strong, who is happy, who is whole. And who is, for the first time since she was a little girl, completely and gloriously free. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It was difficult to tell, but I believe in the power of sharing our truths. My question for you all is this: what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is just starting to realize they are in a deeply toxic family or relationship? Please share your wisdom in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you would give this video a like and subscribe for more stories of survival, strength, and starting over.